Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Well, the wait to see Shedeur Sanders is over. The wait for another Browns win continues. Sanders' NFL debut was mostly a dud as the Browns failed to score in the second half as Baltimore rallied for a 23-16 win as the Browns fell to 2-8. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What is going on, Chud?
Oh, here we go. I mean, Scott, I say it last week or was it 2 weeks ago that my concern was that you're going to see Shedeur because of an injury, and I
Yeah.
didn't want to wish it upon Gabriel. I didn't want it to be that way, but that's the thing about this situation. The Browns put themselves in, and they didn't have an experienced backup, and they had to go to him as the backup. I would have preferred Scott to have seen his debut being after a week of being prepared. And I feel like that was kind of a miss by the Browns, having it happen this way. Thoughts?
Well, I guess my first question, Chud, is how do you avoid that? Just by going to him as a starter earlier, or having Bailey Zappi be the backup to come in off the bench because he's done it before. He's started games. He's played in the league. Like, what would you have preferred they do there?
Yeah, so I think in hindsight, that would be it to have Zappy be the
Yeah,
backup
yeah,
just a veteran quarterback.
yeah,
That said, I wouldn't have predicted that in the future because, or I'm sorry, I wouldn't have predicted that in the past
yeah.
because I do think Shedeur should be the next guy up, right? But
Yeah.
I guess the next guy, like in a perfect world, if you could go back
Sure.
and do it over again, I would have had Zappy be the backup and just deal with the bull crap you face from all the
Right.
negativity of having Sanders not be your backup.
Yeah,
And then now this week you prepare Sanders to be
yeah.
your guy. That said, maybe there's an argument to all right, at least he got in and got a little experience last week. Maybe that will help him prepare for this week. So maybe I'm backtracking a little. I don't know. I guess I could see maybe that being the case, but I guess the bottom line is it did not go well. That was
Correct.
not a great debut. Also, though, that said, as I go back and forth here, if that if that play is made in the end zone, boy, do we have a much different tune, right? If that catch is made.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a million times. That's how the NFL works, right? If Shedeur had finished 5 for 16, but it was a touchdown to Gage Larvadan, or even the play before that to Isaiah Bond, and then they go for two and win the game, we're not talking about 5 for 16. We're talking, or yeah, well, I think it would have been 5 for 16. We're talking about, oh my gosh, uh, you know, the composure he shows, the big playability, the fact that he was able to salvage something after such a terrible start. So yeah, the narrative would have changed, but it didn't happen. And it's 4 for 16 for 47 yards, an interception, another near interception, a fumble, and intentional grounding. So it was not good by any stretch. Shedeur Sanders admitted that. And we'll break it down a little bit, but I want to go back to how you started. I think your points are well taken, Chud, and it speaks more to how the quarterback position has been handled all season by this organization. And it feels different because it would be Bailey Zappi as opposed to Joe Flacco. But the Browns are going to have that. The Browns had that plan for that 1 week before they got the unexpected offer for Flacco from Cincinnati, where Flacco was going to be the backup. But if Gabriel had gotten hurt, the next week Shedeur Sanders would have started. Right? They were on that plan as early as week 5. So could they have done that with Bailey Zappi? Sure. Now they would have had to sign Zappi to the active roster instead of being on the practice squad. So that would have created some, you would have had to sacrifice a roster spot there on your 53. But they could have done that. And what it would have done is saved Shedeur Sanders from taking his first snaps with the first team offense being in a game as opposed to in practice. The counter, like you mentioned, is well, at least he got these reps, right? At least he's got these game reps that should help him. Let's assume he starts against the Raiders on Sunday. We could if that's up to if Dillon Gabriel clears the protocol. He was still in it Monday. I would think that Gabriel would have to be out of the protocol, or he would have to be practicing Wednesday, not necessarily completely out of the protocol, but practicing Wednesday. if he's not able to practice Wednesday, then you have to just commit to Shedeur Sanders as your starter for Sunday. Gabriel is still a rookie, hasn't played enough where you say, well, if he's good to go Friday or Saturday, it's not Pat Mahomes, it's Dillon Gabriel. I think you just get Shedeur Sanders ready to go, and I think that's the plan the Browns will do. And I think it's unlikely that Gabriel will be able to practice Wednesday. That's just too quick a turnaround. We'll find out for sure Wednesday. We're taping this Tuesday. So, having said all that, that's the balance, right? That okay, he's got some game experience, which should help him moving forward, but at the sacrifice of the Browns were unable to finish off a victory against the Ravens, and they led 16-10 at halftime. If they had one or two drives in the second half on offense that resulted in points, they win that game. And it's what this whole year is about. Trying to balance winning right now versus preparing for the future and getting your rookies ready and getting your rookies playing time. And what we've seen this year is the Browns are unable to do both, right? They're unable to win while trying to do this, quote, do this partial rebuild or however you want to phrase it. And this was just the latest example where I don't know if Bailey Zappi would have won that game, but I think would have had a better chance than Shedeur Sanders. I know that Joe Flacco, if he had still been here, would have had a better chance to finish off a win versus the Ravens than Shedeur Sanders. And you might be able to say the same thing about Kenny Pickett. Yet, those guys are no longer here. And they're not here because there's a conscious decision made to go younger at the most important position. And that's going to have consequences. And it's going to have consequences in the win-loss record. And when we talk about the future of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and all those things, it's tied to the wins. But it's really hard to win when you're so young and you're so young at that key position. We're talking a third and fifth rounder. We're not talking a top 5 pick. So I think what you started with, Chud, just encapsulates the difficult, maybe impossible world that the Browns are trying to navigate.
Yeah. And I think looking back on it now is not necessarily saying, oh, they shouldn't have traded Pickett or they shouldn't have traded Flacco. It's they shouldn't have maybe traded both. Like at least keep one of them, right? Pick which one you want to keep. I know they did Flacco solid and let him continue playing at the end of his career, but I guess it would have been nice if they would have stuck with their plan and had at least one of them.
I agree. I agree, Chud. And I would have gone Joe Flacco to start the season. But then I probably wouldn't have. We talked about it a million times. I wouldn't have traded him to Cincinnati, right? I just would not have. And I would have felt better about the quarterback room with Joe Flacco here. Having said that, I also, the farther we get away from this, from the Pickett trade, the more I question it. At the time, we hadn't seen a lot of Kenny Pickett. He had the hamstring injury. But what it shows me is that the Browns are kind of all over the place, right, with their quarterback plan. And that's not a good, that's not a good description of how you want to handle your quarterback situations by being all over the place. And when I say that, I mean, so they sign they trade for Kenny Pickett in the offseason, and they believe he can be their starter. And then I believe they felt that way heading into training camp. Then he hurts his hamstring, misses time, and all of a sudden the decision is made is not only is he not going to be a starter, you're going to get rid of him for a 5th-round draft pick. Like, how can your conviction about a quarterback be so temporary that, okay, a hamstring injury happens, and you're like, okay, we're done with this guy. And for a 5th-round pick, which I don't value nearly as much as Andrew Berry does, and the organization does. And I get that maybe they saw Dillon Gabriel show what they felt he needed to show, that he could be the backup to Joe Flacco. And they also believe that, hey, we know that they want to see the rookie quarterbacks. I just don't think there was enough commitment. And maybe you could say, hey, there shouldn't be that much commitment to Kenny Pickett, and I understand that side of it. But I just feel like you should have a more solid plan at quarterback than, okay, a hamstring injury takes the start away. Okay, a 1-3 start with turnovers that aren't necessarily his fault. Take Joe Flacco away. and then you're left with two rookies.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's at the root of a lot of the problems this season, Chud.
Yeah. Scott, there's a lot of people that are complaining that the Browns have not prepared Shedeur for
Yeah.
the moment. But my question to you is, how do you prepare two rookie quarterbacks?
Well, yeah. Kevin Stefanski will have the same question. Um, so first of all, I'm glad you brought this up, and obviously we needed to talk about this. And I feel pretty strongly, and I wrote an analysis about this. It's on Brown Zone. Kevin Stefanski should not be criticized for a lack of first team practice reps for Shedeur Sanders. He is trying to get Dillon Gabriel ready to play. Dillon Gabriel's a third round rookie that needs every rep that he can get in practice. And he's not been good enough. So you think taking practice reps away from Dillon Gabriel is going to help you win on Sunday? No. So, and it's just the way of the league. The majority of the teams, I would say the vast majority of teams, give, if not all, almost all, the first team practice reps to the starter. There's just not enough reps in a practice week in the NFL. That's just the way it is. The practices are pretty short. You got special teams you got to deal with. You got to work on your defense. And so the defense is going against the scout team offense. There's just not a lot of pure reps for the first team offense. And there's quarterbacks across the league that never wanted to give up any of those reps, right? Peyton Manning, Kurt Warner. Like the starters feel the need to have as many as possible. So, especially when it's another rookie. So, I don't blame Kevin Stefanski for not changing his philosophy because it's Shedeur Sanders, right? Like that doesn't make sense. Now, it puts Shedeur Sanders in a really difficult spot when he's forced to play against the Ravens defense for the first time. There's no doubt about that. The other argument I would make is, so how many reps would you want to give Shedeur? Do you give him three? Is 3 reps twice a week really going to make that big a difference when we get to, okay, the Ravens are bringing all out pressure in his first NFL action? I would say no. So I don't blame Stefanski for that one bit. And then the second part of it is just he's trying to get Shedeur Sanders as well prepared as he can without those first team reps. So this year the Browns added extra practices Saturday and Mondays for all these young guys on their roster, which they never did in the past. And Shedeur's taken part in those. They have those hungry dog periods after practice, and they did it throughout training camp. And they're doing it in the regular season where the young guys, and that includes practice squad guys, but the young guys on the roster are getting extra reps in an attempt to get them as ready as possible and to help them develop as much as possible. So I think Stefanski's doing all he can in a difficult spot. Now, the next layer of that is I would expect Shedeur Sanders to be better when he has a full week of practice with the first team offense, right? That just should happen. Now, I don't know if it's going to be night and day, and let's assume it's Sunday in Vegas. Like, I don't know if it's going to be night and day that Shedeur Sanders, because he has 3 days of practice with the first team offense, is going to have unbelievable chemistry with Jerry Jeudy now. Like, that feels like it's asking too much, but he will have some comfort level, not only having played that half, but being out there at practice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, go through the walkthrough Saturday. He gets the game plan all week, and it's tailored to Shedeur Sanders as opposed to Dillon Gabriel or Joe Flacco. And whatever tweaks that looks like, right? But he's a different quarterback than Dillon Gabriel, so things will look different. And I just think all of it, everybody, the whole coaching staff is concentrated on getting you ready for that game on Sunday. And there's no way that doesn't help Shedeur. Now, I don't know if it helps him enough where he goes out and lights it up, but it should look better than it did Sunday against the Ravens.
God, so I agree with pretty much everything you said there. And I understand that the week of, you can't, get 2 rookie quarterbacks ready or even 2 quarterbacks. It doesn't matter whether they're rookies or not. But we did hear, and you know more about this because you hear pretty much every quote from everyone, right? But
Yeah.
I heard some people saying that had never heard his cadence before, that he had never taken a snap with the first team. How is it possible from training camp, how has he never at least taken one snap or worked with the first team at all? Is that correct? Never?
Yeah, you know what, Chad? I don't think that is. And I'd have to go triple check. And, I watched all those training camp practices. And I know for a long time we had talked about, no, he wasn't getting any of those. I feel like at some point he did get a handful of reps with the first team offense. Now, Wyatt Teller talked about the cadence. Now, are they remembering his cadence from August 15th? 3 months later, probably not. So I don't think it's the first time he's ever taken a snap from Ethan Posick. Um, I would think that'd be silly. Whether it's on the sideline when something happens or before a game, you take a couple of snaps. Again, do those three snaps matter on a Wednesday when you get to Sunday? I don't know. That's an argument that I don't know, right? I don't know the answer to that. But I don't think, it's not the first time he's ever thrown a pass to Jerry Jeudy. And he kind of joked about that after the game where he said it, but then he said, no. It's just, there's not a lot, right? There just hasn't been a lot of reps with that group, especially lately, right? I think there were a few in August. But since the season started, it's probably true that since the regular season started, he has not taken full any of those reps with the entire 11. Now, has he gotten a snap with Posick on occasion? Maybe. Has he thrown a pass to Jeudy during warm-ups or during the one-on-ones? Probably. But there hasn't been that work with the first-team offense.
I got to go sidetrack here. I wasn't even going to bring this up, but I just thought of it now. One thing is I feel like the national media, we've talked about the national media, but it's just hilarious how some people say the Browns are sabotaging him. And then there's others that say they know for sure that he's way better than Dillon or anyone else and he should be the guy. How can anyone know that right now? And do you really believe the Browns are trying to sabotage him? It's really crazy, the national narrative.
Well, first of all, you can say whatever you want these days, Chud. Right? Say whatever you want, pretend like you know everything. And, it's hard to disprove that. Number one, the Browns are not trying to sabotage Shedeur Sanders. What sense does that make? It doesn't make any sense. He's on the roster. They're trying to win games. Kevin Stefanski knows he might have to play him. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, we could argue and discuss that it might have been stupid to draft two quarterbacks and all of a sudden you're left with two rookies and you don't know about either one of them and now you're trying to get both of them ready or at least see both of them before you go draft another quarterback next year. We could talk about whether it made sense to draft Shedeur Sanders. But once he was here, why would the Browns sabotage him? It makes no sense. I think that I heard Jason Lloyd on your extra point or point after show, right, on Monday night. With Mary Kay, and he said of all the dumb things, that's the dumbest he's heard, or I don't want to misquote Jason, but he's right. Like that is a ridiculous narrative that I feel like has just been. I don't know if it's all the Shedeur fans that have, propagated this, and that's where it comes from. And God love all the Shedeur fans, but it's just silly. It doesn't make any sense. So I want to disprove or whatever, disavow that theory. Now, what was the second part of that, Judd? Who's better? Yeah, I mean, I can have an opinion. I think Shedeur Sanders is a better quarterback. Well, let me say this. I think Shedeur Sanders is more talented than Dillon Gabriel. If you asked them both to go play right now, we could have an argument. Who's a better quarterback? I don't know. I've seen a lot of Dillon Gabriel. I've seen one half of Shedeur Sanders. I think
so.
Sanders
Scott, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you because I was going to present this to you in a fashion of, I know you've only seen a little bit of Shedeur, one and a half, but literally Petrak's making the call and one guy leaves the island and one guy moves on. Yeah. Who are you taking with you? Are you keeping Shedeur in Cleveland or are you keeping Gabriel? And you can only keep one.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm going to give you one disclaimer, and it's probably a big one, but I've not been behind the scenes with Shedeur, right? I don't know what he's like in meetings. Having said that, I would keep Shedeur. I think Shedeur is a more talented quarterback. I think he's a more talented thrower than Dillon Gabriel. The height bothers me with Dillon Gabriel. I like Shedeur coming out of the draft, and nothing that I've seen since both those guys have been here have made me say Dillon Gabriel has a higher ceiling than Shedeur Sanders.
Okay, so what did you think of Gabriel in the first half? What did you think of the offense in general?
Yeah,
And what did you think about the crowd and the reaction?
yeah,
So I'm kind of throwing a bunch at you there
yeah.
for you to just take off and go.
Well, I thought Dillon Gabriel looked like he mostly looks, which is just fine. He's 7 for 10. I think it was 67 yards. Just not no explosive, no wow moments, no big playmaking moments. He made a nice throw where he rolled out to the left and hit Cedric Tillman on a kind of crossing route for, I don't know, 19 or 20 yards. It was a good throw and it was a good play. Um, but they got the ball on the 3 yard line, and this isn't necessarily Gabriel's fault, but they get the ball on the 6 yard line after the muff punt. They run it for three, then they lose three, so it's 3rd and 6, and he doesn't make a play. Again, I don't know if that's all his fault. There's a little pressure. Judy was covered, but they didn't score a touchdown on offense in the first half. They had a pick six. They had that field goal where they were handed the ball to 6 yard line. So that's 10 points, right? And then they had two other field goals. So, they moved the ball but couldn't get in the end zone. So I thought he was just fine. He didn't turn it over, which obviously is one of the things he's mostly done well. Um, I thought he was just fine. We talk about but I thought the offense was an issue again, right? They only scored one touchdown all game, Chud, and it was a defensive touchdown. Now that part of that, or a lot of that, was during the second half, and you knew there were going to be struggles, but it wasn't good enough offensively. I went back and I was watching it. I didn't make it through the whole game, but I did I did see it was early in the game. They have a 4th and 1, and they go for it, and they convert with a run to Quinshon Judkins, and it gets called back because there's an illegal formation. Well, said Tillman, the receiver, is lined up on the wrong side. So the left tackle is uncovered, which is an illegal formation. So they run it, and I don't know if that's where Gabriel should notice that coming out of the huddle. Somebody should notice it, but you can read Stefanski's, and I wrote down, I said, Tillman, wrong spot, wrong side, and then the TV camera shows Stefanski is Tillman's walking off, goes, Cedric, you're on the wrong side. So, I know they coach that, and yet the guy still lines up on the wrong side. So that ends a drive, right? And we just see too many of those mistakes, whether it's poor protection, guys lining up wrong, whatever it is. And, we don't want to get in a big picture discussion if that's Stefanski's fault or not. The player's got to be in the right spot. Maybe the quarterback's supposed to figure that out. But it robs them of a possession they have to punt. So anyway, the offense wasn't good enough. When it talks about the crowd, I really liked what Shedeur said after the game when he was asked about the reaction to him entering. And obviously it was loud, and he encouraged it, once he came in the game. He said, but I don't like that I don't know if he said, I don't like how Dillon was treated, but he said he wishes he were treated better because it affects a guy's confidence. It affects a guy's comfort ability when you know that the crowd is pulling for somebody else. And we had, when there were 3rd down incompletions, there were boos. I heard a couple Shedeur chants, right, early in that game. So obviously the reaction was huge for Sanders. I understand that. That's predictable. But I liked that he kind of got in front of that and said he didn't like how the support wasn't there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. The support wasn't there for Dillon.
Yeah. Overall, the game, I can't remember what score you had. Do you remember the score you had?
Yeah, I had 24-17.
24-17, 23-16. So
right?
you were almost right on.
It's almost a double nostril.
Yeah. Well, wow. Yeah. So I had 24-10, and I stick by that score. I thought that the Ravens would cover. What I didn't predict was that the Browns would have multiple turnovers on defense, along with 4 sacks from Myles Garrett, and they still lost the game, Scott. That's incredible. If you would tell a team that they would play that well on defense, get the turnovers like that, have your number one guy, one of the best to ever play the game, get 4 sacks, and you lose. I mean, how many teams would let that happen? That just shows you how bad they are on the other side of the ball.
Right.
And it's incredible. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that the only reason that the game was as close as it was because of the defense. I mean, if I mean, I didn't think Lamar Jackson played all that well. Did you? I was not like. I know Baltimore's probably going to win the division, but I wasn't really impressed by them, at least last Sunday. And a lot of people weren't impressed with how they were against the Vikings either, but they're getting wins.
Right. I mean, their schedule's gotten a lot easier recently, which contributes to their 4-game winning streak. I mean, Lamar's great. He did not play great, but I attribute a lot of that to the Browns defense, Chud. I thought the Browns defense overall played great. They gave the one long Henry run that set up a touchdown. And then the 4th and 1, Mark Andrews, the game-winning touchdown. Yeah, I just thought it was a great play call. I mean, obviously the defense is responsible there, but it looks like it's going to be a tush push. You got Lamar, so the defense has to be aware in case there's a pitch to Lamar, and then Andrews just spins and keeps it. That does a great play call. The defense, I thought, again, played plenty well enough to win. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think Lamar's issues were because the defense was so good. And, I want to talk about Miles, Judd, and he is on an absolute heater, which I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, right? But 10 sacks in the last 3 games, 11 in the last 4 games. I thought what was different about Miles' sacks against Lamar, and part of it is you can't be over-aggressive when you rush Lamar, because if you do, he could get outside and be gone. So the Browns, since Lamar's been in the league, the Browns have a different plan when they rush him, and you have to be more in control. And you saw that from Miles, and it helped him get those 4 sacks. But you also need the coverage to be there, because they weren't like Miles wasn't beating his guy instantly and then getting Lamar. Lamar had to reset, and then Miles, the second and third effort, was able to get there. But I want to ask him about this Friday. I think he would give a lot of credit to the coverage that the Browns played on the back end, which just speaks to the overall defensive play. But, Myles Garrett, he's got 15 sacks. He's got more sacks than like a handful of teams in the league. Mark Gastineau in 1984 is the only player to have more than Miles' 15 sacks through 10 games. And Gastineau that year set the record with 22, which has been broken by Strahan and then tied by TJ Watt with 22 and a half. So Miles is right there. We're talking he's in position to go chase down the season sack record for the NFL, which is remarkable. Richard Dent, I think the stat was he and Richard Dent are the only players to have 10 sacks over a 3-game period. Richard Dent's a Hall of Famer. Miles passed Lawrence Taylor. They were tied with 5 straight seasons of 12 sacks or more, and now Miles has 6 seasons of 12 sacks or more. The only player in NFL history to do that. Like, these are mind-numbing numbers that he's putting up, despite the fact that the Browns are terrible, despite the fact that they're usually trailing, so teams run the ball a bunch. It's truly remarkable what he's doing, and I just hope people appreciate it, and I hope it doesn't get lost. And it won't get lost because he's now an overwhelming favorite to be Defensive Player of the Year. But what he's doing is incredible. And Mark Andrews, the tight end for the Ravens who had that touchdown run, said last week that Miles might be the best athlete to ever play defense in the NFL. And he said he might also be the best defensive end ever. Like, those are crazy statements that really aren't crazy because they might be true. And, I don't want to go down the road of should they trade him or not trade him. But I do think there should be an appreciation of what – I know the season is terrible. I know the record's terrible. I get it. But I think there should be an appreciation of the kind of transcendent play that Browns fans are getting to see in Myles Garrett.
Yeah, no question. And I just hope we're not looking back one day and feeling the same way about him as we do with Joe Thomas.
Joe Thomas, yep.
I mean, that's. I hope that's not the case. I agree with you. Also, I'm so glad you said that about Mark Andrews' play, because there's so many times where, like, you jump off sides, like we saw a couple weeks ago, or pre-snap penalties, or they lose the game because of just a stupid mistake, or a special teams error, just something that just drives you crazy. But I kind of had, after that Andrews play, my first reaction was almost going to be, how do you let that happen? Oh, they just blew it. But then immediately I just said, you know what? Give the Ravens credit. They just made an absolute amazing call, perfected it, executed it. And sometimes you just have to tip your hat and say, they beat us. They made the better play. That's what happened there, in my opinion. I agree with you. I mean, and I watched it a bunch of times in slow motion. There's a couple guys that did recognize it just a hair late, and they just didn't have the athletic ability to get to him in time. But it was just a great play.
Yeah, I agree. I have a hard time blaming the Browns for that. I mean, if you give up, if it's just 2.5 minutes left, if you give up the first down there and don't sell out, right, and just you say you play wide, so you know that they can't beat you for a touchdown. They get the easy conversion, and then they probably run the last 2.5 minutes off and kick the winning field goal, and you lose. So I just think you have to sell out and try to stop it, because if you get the stop there, then you're in position to go win the game. And so it'll be interesting to see what Jim Schwartz says, the defense coordinator. But I have a hard time blaming the Browns on that, just like you, bud.
Yeah, I mean, you can also go with the reaction of you can't let that happen. I get it, but I mean, yeah, just a great play call. Well, as far as there obviously we need to talk about the Raiders game coming up, and that will be the last thing we do. Is there anything else you want to hit on as far as the Browns go before I wanted to bring up Bernie?
The only other thing I wanted to say, I got one thing I just want to get off my chest, and it could just be a pet peeve of mine, Chud. I keep hearing about accountability, right? And you have to have accountability, and I understand that that's important. I'm not sure firing someone or cutting someone is the only way to have accountability, right? So if somebody messes up, and I think this applies to any walk of life, I'm not sure the only way you hold somebody accountability, and that word for whatever is kind of triggering me, is because I've been hearing it so much over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if the only way to hold somebody accountable is for them to lose their job. And I just wanted to say that, because I think, you can hold Bubba Ventrone accountable for having poor special teams without firing him. I think you can hold Cam Thomas accountable for jumping offside at the end of the Jets game without cutting him. There's a way, I don't think the Browns are ignoring bad things that happen. I know they're not. They go into the film and they break it down, they point it all out. They say, you need to do this better. And I get at some point, if things keep happening and happening and happening, then there is, people lose jobs. I'm not blind to that reality. But I don't think accountability is a zero-sum game where it's either you're fired, and if you're not fired, then nobody is holding you accountable. And I wasn't sure I was going to go there, but I had a little note to myself, and I wanted to get that off my chest. The other thing is Carson Schlesinger. We just need to mention how great he's playing, Chud. We talked about him playing through the high ankle against the Jets. Played great again against Baltimore. And that interception he makes, I think Lamar threw it into somebody's helmet, and it goes straight up in the air. He's got a tight end in front of him, and he just out rebounds him. He jumps over him, reaches, and then he runs for some yards. He's playing out of his mind. He did a great job against Lamar. There's a play early in the game. It's him and Lamar one-on-one in space. Lamar stiff arms him. He shakes off the stiff arm and still tackles Lamar I think it's a tackle for loss. I know it's at least no gain. That was a big-time athletic play in space against perhaps the greatest athlete to play this game. We talk about Miles, the greatest defensive athlete. Lamar might be the greatest athlete to ever play this game. So Schlesinger is playing fantastic. People are talking about his teammates are talking about him as an all-pro candidate, and that is not crazy at all. He might be an all-pro as a rookie. And talk about Miles winning Defensive Player of the Year on a losing team. Carson Schlesinger is a huge favorite to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. So we could get to the end of the season and go, okay, the Browns go whatever, pick a number, a record, 4-13, whatever. Yet they have the Defensive Player of the Year and the Defensive Rookie of the Year, which just show you how bad the offense is. But he deserves all the credit. I didn't like the pick at the time. I thought that was too high to take a linebacker. And I haven't shifted my stance philosophically. I think that's high to take a linebacker, but there's no way you can argue with the pick of Carson Schlesinger. He's been phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I did think about bringing it up, but we touched on it last week. But maybe that's just going to be the case where we touch on him every week. I
Right.
mean, it is kind of crazy to think what this defense can continue to be with him and Garrett for sure, and hopefully the offense could turn it around. Um, so let's get to Bernie real quick,
Yeah.
and he's obviously been sharing his story, but. Scott, I think I've mentioned this before, but and after you answer this, you can get into the health updates and what's going on. But just in general, Bernie and people are sharing their opinions, and he is getting so much love right now, and with good reason. But this is a guy, Scott, that and you could argue, and I think we've talked about this before, but he could be the most popular Cleveland sports athlete ever, and that's including LeBron and many others. But Bernie might be number one.
Yeah, he might be Chud. And I thought about that last week. I've obviously been thinking a lot about Bernie and writing about Bernie in the last week. And I certainly, it's tough to cross sports, right? I mean, LeBron is LeBron, but LeBron's had his haters and the detractors, and obviously he left twice. So I get that it's a difficult comparison there. Um, people love Jim Tomey, but I mean he had his issues too, right? So you could go down the list of guys who would be in that discussion, but I don't think there is anybody more beloved than there's certainly no Browns player more beloved than Bernie in my lifetime. And he was in my wheelhouse. I was, 12 when the Browns are getting ready to turn 12 when the Browns drafted him. So that talk about formative years, the drive, the fumble, all that. Watching him play those teams, and I just don't know if you're in that age range, right? Um, not only are those the best Browns teams you've ever seen, consistently three AFC North or three AFC title games in 4 years. So you have that part of it, but then you have the beloved part of Bernie. And what also makes him beloved, it's not only what he did on the field, it's the fact that he was from Boardman, made sure he played for the Browns, graduated early, entered the supplemental draft, all those things. It's that he stayed here, he stayed connected to Cleveland after and the Browns, and he was so accessible, whether it was being, the TV preseason broadcast or being on the radio, which we hear him all the time, or being around town or around the facility. I mean, he was done playing by the time, obviously, I started covering the team. But then I got to see Bernie enough, right? Where if you run into him, I'll talk to him. So I think there's just something about, not only in that, he's crazy positive, which we're seeing from the videos he's posting from the hospital bed, right? He just has this something about him that makes everybody want to love him. And I would not argue with you at all, Chud, if you wanted to say declaratively that he's the most beloved athlete ever, certainly in the last 40 years, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I hate when people sometimes, I don't want to say hate, but on social media you can easily turn situations like this and make it about yourself, and that's not what I want to do here. But
Right.
I do want to say with what I dealt with earlier this year with having prostate cancer, he texted me a bunch of times and called me, and I had I think like a 45-minute conversation with him. I mean, he took that much time out of his day. He's a busy guy and he's a lot going on.
Right.
And it is amazing, Scott, how many people he keeps in contact with and talks to. And believe me, I'm one of a lot. Like, he cares so much about people. And, he talks about, his thing he always ends with, "You matter."
Right.
But Scott, do you realize what, I just, you just talked about your wheelhouse. Like, I was, let's see, 1985, I was 10. And I mean, those teams, man, I mean, that was I know this sounds crazy, but the Browns in those years, one of the most important things in my life.
Sure. Sure.
Those years, and I wish people could experience what that was like from, basically 85 to, kind of ended in 89. Yeah, 89, a little bit into that, but and oh my gosh, Scott, those were, so for me is a 49, 50-year-old guy now getting a call from Bernie Kosar with prostate cancer. And I think I have maybe touched on this with you before, but that just meant the world to me. And I just want him to know. And I've reached out to him, and you know, we all have his back, and we just want the best for him. And thankfully, he was able to get that liver transplant, and hopefully everything comes out okay for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure I knew that, Chud, about him calling you. That's awesome. It's not surprising, but it's still really cool to hear. And Kevin Stefanski talked about it Monday that because he didn't know Bernie, growing up. I mean, he was young, plus he was in Philly. But he goes, Bernie's my guy. He always seeks out his family at games. He always sends encouraging messages to Stefanski, and that doesn't surprise me one bit. I think the last time I had a conversation with Bernie was during training camp, and he was back doing some broadcast stuff. And I ran into him in the lobby, and we just talked for a few minutes. And at the time, he was optimistic about the liver transplant. We talked about it, and that was 3 months ago. So I'm sure it's been a long, excruciating wait for him. And then obviously last week things got worse physically. He had internal bleeding. He said he had to have a handful of procedures to stop that so he could be able to get the transplant or get the new liver when it became available. He thought he had one last week, I think it was Sunday, but it wound up the liver had an infection or whatever. It wasn't going to work. So then he had to fight through all that week. And then he went in Monday and had the transplant. And the last update I saw was he came out of surgery and said he was feeling good. So I know everybody's pulling for him. Hopefully, I know that that's a really difficult surgery. So hopefully he's able to fight through it and it doesn't take a ton out of him and all that good stuff, right? That it just keeps going well. But yeah, those are all great Bernie stories. And he's, the other thing about Bernie, is he's flawed, right? We all know that he's flawed and he's been upfront about that. But the fact that he's upfront about it and he doesn't shy away from it and he talks about it and he admits all his mistakes. And there's just something so, I think, genuine. I don't know if genuine is the perfect word, but I know it fits, about Bernie. Authentic, like that's just who Bernie is. And I think that comes through in how he talks and everything he does. And I think when you have right now it's 40 years. And when you have a 40-year relationship with somebody, as a fan even, right? But you've heard him so often, like, what's real. And Bernie's just real.
Yeah, real. That is a great way of putting it. You don't ever sit there. You know how like you run into people and people ask me all the time. Like they bring up someone that's works at Channel 3 or an athlete, and they're like, "Hey, what's that person really like?" Because no one knows for sure. They think maybe they know, but they're not. But with Bernie, I think you pretty much know. And he's let you know. And the last thing, because we could talk more about Bernie as the weeks go on, and hopefully it's continued updates as to positive things, right?
Right.
And that's and you know what? Another thing, I just thought of this now. Unfortunately, in our lives, we talk about people like this after they've passed.
Yep.
I've always thought I wish we would do this more for people before they left. We were able. When Jim Donovan retired, we were able to basically do that whole special. Remember, you came in and, people were able to tell Jim how they felt about him. Now, people didn't realize how, sick he was at that point. But, sometimes we don't get to tell people how we feel about him until it's too late. So, this is an opportunity, to do that for somebody. And the last thing I want to say about Bernie, you kind of hit on this, but, the one reason I know as a kid, now I got to be honest, this doesn't mean as much to me now at 50 years old, but boy, like when Tommy left, that was just heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
When these athletes leave town, it always crushed me. I don't know why. It doesn't bother me as much anymore as I'm getting older. But Bernie wanted to be in Cleveland, and that will always. I remember as a kid just being like, this guy wants to be on my team. This guy wants to be in our city. And I think that's a big thing that goes a long way with him. He's one of us and wants to be.
Oh, there's no doubt, Chud. Yeah, I mean, that's right. That's near the top of the list or at the top of the list. Yeah, without a doubt. He don't want to go anywhere. And obviously that, the end of the Bernie Browns thing is the Belichick cutting him, diminishing skills, all that. And I thought it was interesting. I was happened to just be on social media yesterday and I had missed it. I was looking for Bernie stuff. And Mike Lombardi and Bill Belichick. I probably should lead with Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick and Mike Lombardi did a video from North Carolina supporting Bernie last week when he was going through, during all the health stuff. And I just found it interesting. I knew that Bernie and Bill had reconnected, and Bernie had forgave him for cutting him and all those things. But I just thought it was kind of cool that those two guys did a video and posted it supporting Bernie.
Yeah, we ran that on the morning
Did you?
show.
I missed it. Yeah.
And I had the same thought you did. I just thought back to diminishing skills and that whole thing. But all right, well, good conversation about Bernie again. We wish Bernie nothing but the best. I know not just people in Cleveland, but boy, he's getting support from all over the place. As you just mentioned right there. All right, let's get on. Let's quickly hit the Raiders here. I don't know how much time you want to spend on what is it, 2-8 versus 2-8?
Yeah.
The Raiders lost last night. I didn't really watch it. But I know Dallas pretty much dominated. What do you say about the Raiders? They're Jets, Raiders, Browns. Titans. This is bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, it is. Pete Carroll hasn't had the immediate impact I'm sure they were hoping out there in Vegas. It's hard. They brought in Geno Smith. He played well in Seattle, so I thought there'd be more wins. They drafted Ashton Genty, but I just don't think they have enough. I guess obviously they don't have enough talent around. Their pass protection's awful, so we'll see if Myles Garrett goes even. What Myles Garrett can do against the bottom of the league or near bottom of the league. Pass protection, Dallas had some instant success last night. Vegas wasn't really able to generate much on offense. I saw some stat. They only ran it 3 times in the first half, even though they have Genty. It was crazy lopsided. So it'll be interesting if there's an overcorrection and they just try to commit to running the ball, although the Browns are pretty good against the run on defense. So, they feel like they're a mess. We know the Browns are a mess. I hate to talk about it, Chud, but it's part of it. The loser is helped out in the draft, right? When they're talking about who's drafting in the top 5. Both these teams are sitting there in position to draft in the top 5. If you get a win, obviously that hurts, in quotation marks, hurts there. But it's going to be an interesting matchup. Maybe not interesting to anybody outside, but interesting from the Browns. You get to see Shedeur Sanders, probably. We already talked about that. It's another opportunity for the Browns to win. And I keep coming back to this. When we talk big picture, long-term, the future of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, wins are going to matter. And this is they blew the one against the Jets. They had a chance to close out the Ravens game. They got the Titans coming up. There's some chances here to win games. And I think they need to win these. They need to win multiple games coming in, I think, for Stefanski and Berry to stick around. I still think that's a chance that they do stick around. I feel like that's what the Haslam's want, is to keep stability and to keep these two guys. They knew how hard it would be to win this year, but you can't lose all these games and there be no repercussions. So I think it's important in that aspect.
All right. So we won't know for sure who's starting quarterback, but we're leaning Shedeur, right?
Yeah, I would say leaning heavily towards Shedeur.
Okay. All right. Raiders, last I looked, were favored by 3.5. Over-unders 36.5. Browns are 2-8. You're 5-5. I'm 6-4. You want to go first or second?
I'll go second.
All right. Not going to spend a lot of time on this. Yeah. I think the Browns are the better team. Their defense is clearly, if you stacked up all the units, right? Defense, offense, special teams, and you have 6 of them, right? You'd put Browns defense as the best, right? I think, Scott, wouldn't that be?
I agree.
Yeah. But and the Raiders have a couple talented. Obviously Bowers is a concern. Genty could get loose. He did nothing last night. But I'll tell you, the Browns are the better team, I think. But it's on the road, and the Browns just can't win on the road. And how is Shedeur going to do? Now, if he does start, Scott, it wouldn't surprise me or anyone out there, if after a week of practice that he could come out and really like have a great game, and maybe like this could be his wow moment or something. I don't know. Maybe it like that wouldn't surprise us, would it? Nothing really surprises us in the NFL, but I'm not going to lay my prediction on it. So I'm going to go Raiders 17,
Wow.
Browns 16.
Interesting, Chud. I might have been influenced by watching some of that Raiders game last night. Go, ooh, just that team's not good.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about my pick here, like I was going to pick the Browns, like, and I didn't really waver on that much. But listening to you talk, I get what you're saying. I think Shedeur's a huge unknown. I think he'll be better, but does he take a couple of big sacks that really hurt the team, which is one of the things he's got. It's a bad habit of his. We saw at Colorado. We saw in that last preseason game against the Rams. We saw again a little bit against the Ravens. Does Max Crosby get a strip sack or two? Right, like the Browns need to figure out how to handle Max Crosby, the outstanding defensive end for the Raiders, because he can wreck a game. So they need to take care of that because Shedeur obviously is having some issues with how to deal with pass rush. Could Shedeur throw some picks? Yeah, like Shedeur could have an awful game and just hand the Raiders the game. Like that's possible. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying it's hard when a guy's making his first NFL start, right? You just don't know what's going to happen. So, but I think the Browns will play pretty conservative. I think the Browns defense will play great again. Like Miles will play great, and you're not going to need a lot of points to win. So I'm going to go Browns 16-10. You got 17-16. Now, if there's a strip sack for a touchdown, all of a sudden I can see the Browns losing 17-16. But I'm going to go 16-10 Browns.
Wow, you're going to put your wagon on a road game.
I mean, they haven't won since week 2 of 2024. Remember they won down in Jacksonville. Yeah, I know. I mean, I hear you. I think there'll be a lot of Browns fans there. It's a good place to go watch a game, right? Like if you're going to plan a trip to go watch your Browns. I was out there last year when the Browns played there for the first time, and maybe there won't be as many Browns fans this year, but there were a bunch of Browns fans walking around the strip. I'll tell you that. So yeah, I mean, I know it's still a road game. There's Vegas fans. I get that. The Raiders fans are loud. But yeah, I don't know. I just think the Browns are. I think they're better than 2-win team, Chud. And I keep thinking they're going to win games, but I've been wrong before. I was wrong against the Jets, right?
Well, that's what I was just going to bring up.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if I want to go down the Jets road again. That's my problem.
I hear you. I mean, I could see them losing. Like I don't have any issue there. But I do think they're still playing hard. I mean, Shedeur, like I said, Shedeur is the great unknown. Right? Like if he plays pretty good, then I think the Browns win the game. If he plays as poorly as he did against the Ravens, it's going to be hard for the Browns to score. There's no doubt there. I guess when I got 16, I probably have a defensive score in there. So can they figure out a way to get 9 points another way? Can they get 3 other field goals? Can they put a drive together? Can the defense get force another turnover? I mean, this offense hasn't been good all year. So, but predicting 16 doesn't seem like a stretch. So, but I could be wrong about that too.
Well, we both have them with 16.
Yeah, right.
That's one thing for sure.
Means they probably won't score 16.
True story.
So, all right, Chud. I appreciate it, bud. A lot of good stuff in this one.
Yeah, no doubt. This is a good one.
Cool. All right. Thanks as always, Chud. I really do appreciate it. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.